The warm embrace of the afternoon sun bathed the old town of marital in a radiant golden glow. Its cobblestone streets bustled with life, filled with people moving in and out of charming shops, cozy cafes, and chic boutiques. In an upscale apartment in one of the town's more affluent neighborhoods, Martin Weiss stood motionless by the window. Though his gaze rested on the vibrant scene outside, his mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts that dulled the lively world beyond the glass. Saturdays once held a special place in Martin's heart. They were cherished, marked by hearty breakfast at his favorite cafe and serene strolls along the Ara River. Those moments, however, now felt like faint echoes of a life that no longer belonged to him. At 40, Martin was an accomplished architect, widely respected in his field. His painstaking attention to detail had secured him contracts for some of Europe's most iconic structures, and his career brought him both recognition and financial success. Yet, despite these achievements, a hollow ache persisted, one that no amount of professional accolades could fill. His wife, Amal, had once been the center of his world. At 34, she remained as captivating as when they first met in Paris. A spirited art student brimming with passion and charisma, effortlessly drawing others into her orbit. Martin, ever practical and meticulous, had been immediately captivated by her free-spirited and artistic nature. At the time, their contrasting personalities seemed to balance each other perfectly. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The vibrant woman he fell in love with began slipping away, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't seem to bridge the growing chasm between them. The strain between them had been building for months. At first, it was subtle. Dinner plans canceled without explanation, unanswered late-night calls, and vague excuses that didn't quite add up. Martin noticed the changes, but convinced himself it was a temporary rough patch, the kind all couples face. He clung to the hope that things would improve, even as a gnawing sense of dread whispered otherwise. One evening, he came home earlier than usual and caught Amal off guard. She sat on the sofa, her phone pressed to her ear, the surprise and fleeting guilt in her eyes as she saw him send a jolt through Martin. Her conversation ended abruptly, and when he asked who she'd been speaking to, she answered too quickly, just a friend. The falsehood was glaring, but Martin chose not to press the issue. Confrontation wasn't in his nature. Instead, he gave her space, hoping she would come back to him when she was ready. But the distance only grew. Amal spent more time away from home, returning later and later each night. The thread connecting them frayed further until one rainy evening, Martin's worst fears were confirmed. While working late on a project, a message from his best friend and colleague Lucas appeared on his phone. Just saw Amal with Victor at a restaurant. The name hit him like a physical blow. Victor was a prominent businessman, known in Munich's elite circles for his charm and self-assured arrogance. Martin had encountered him at several social events, where Victor's disdain for him was thinly veiled. There had always been something in the way Victor interacted with Amal, subtle but unmistakable. His gaze lingered a moment too long, his posture leaned in just a bit too close. Though Martin dismissed these moments at the time, the message from Lucas made it impossible to ignore the truth. Amal was having an affair. In the weeks that followed, Martin found himself in a haze. Confronting her outright felt impossible. Instead, he pretended not to know, clinging to a desperate hope that there was some other explanation. He wished foolishly that Amal's behavior was just a phase, a lapse she would soon outgrow. When she realized the depth of what they had together, the growing distance between them felt like an unbridgeable chasm. Martin's attempts to reconnect with Amal only seemed to push her further away, as though every effort he made inadvertently widened the gap. She spent increasing amounts of time with Victor, and though she claimed to be visiting friends or attending art galleries, Martin knew better. Each time she walked out the door, dread settled heavily in his chest, a silent confirmation of where and with whom she was truly going. Eventually, his fear solidified into reality. One evening, Martin came home to a dark, empty house. Amal was nowhere to be found. He paced the living room, checking his phone repeatedly for any messages, any indication of her return, but his screen remained blank. Hours crawled by, each moment amplifying his unease. Then, just after midnight, the door creaked open. Amal stepped inside. Her hair plastered to her face from the rain, her clothes soaked through. She froze when she saw Martin waiting for her on the sofa. "Where have you been?" he asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. She hesitated, her eyes dropping to the floor as though searching for courage. Finally, after a moment of silence, she confessed, "I was with Victor." The word struck him like a physical blow. Even though he'd suspected it for some time, hearing her say it aloud was unbearable. A sharp twist of a knife he thought he had already braced for. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Martin, please. How long?" This time, his tone carried more weight, trembling with both hurt and anger. Amal took a deep breath before meeting his gaze. Her voice was faint, but the truth was undeniable. 6 months, she whispered. 6 months. Half a year of deceit, lies, and betrayal. Martin clenched his hands into fists, trying to steady the trembling that had overtaken him. 6 months, he repeated, as though saying it aloud might help him grasp its enormity. "You've been with him for 6 months?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes, but Martin couldn't bring himself to care about her tears. He didn't want her pity or even her regret. He wanted answers. He wanted his wife back, the woman he had loved so deeply, who once loved him in return. "Why?" he asked, his voice raw with anguish. "Why him?" Amal turned her face away, unable to meet his eyes. She stood there, rain-soaked and defeated, the silence between them almost unbearable. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know. It just happened." Her words only deepened the wound. A storm of thoughts churned in Martin's mind. He wanted to yell, to demand an explanation, to force her to make sense of it all. But no words came. He was drowning in the weight of her betrayal, overwhelmed by the realization that everything they had built together, their love, their marriage, was crumbling before his eyes. "Was I not enough for you?" His voice cracked under the strain of his emotions. "Was our life not enough?" Amal began to cry, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "We were happy, Martin. I swear we were. But I've changed, and I don't know how to explain it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Her apology, though heartfelt, felt empty. It couldn't undo the damage, nor could it erase the pain etched into Martin's heart. He stood there, staring at her, feeling like a stranger in his own home, a home that now seemed foreign and unfamiliar. "I want to leave," Amal said suddenly, her voice trembling with guilt and resolve. Martin blinked, stunned. "Leave," he repeated, his disbelief evident. "Just like that." She nodded, wiping at her tears with shaky hands. "I've ruined everything, Martin. I can't stay here and hurt you anymore." Her words hung heavy in the room, final and irrevocable. Martin's chest tightened as the truth became undeniable. The life they had built together, the love they once shared, was gone. As much as he wanted to deny it, to cling to the hope that things might still be salvaged, the reality before him was stark and clear. The woman he loved was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. She told him she wanted to leave. For what felt like an eternity, neither of them spoke. The only sound in the room the steady ticking of the clock, a cruel reminder that their shared life was slipping further into the past with each passing second. Finally, Martin broke the silence. His voice was calm but resolute as he said, "If you leave with him now, there will be no coming back." Amal froze, caught off guard by his firmness. She had known Martin as patient, understanding, and forgiving, but his tone left no room for doubt. This wasn't a threat. It was a promise. She stood there, torn between the man she had once loved deeply and the man who now brought her excitement and unpredictability. Victor had been a whirlwind of passion and newness, but the cost of that excitement was painfully clear. In this moment, she realized the magnitude of what she was about to lose. Yet Her decision had already been made. "I'm willing to take that chance," she whispered, her words barely audible but resolute. Martin watched in silence as she turned and walked out of the apartment. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed in the emptiness, reverberating through the space that now felt colder and more hollow than ever. He stood motionless, staring at the door, knowing that everything had changed. Amal was gone. The days that followed were the darkest of Martin's life. The weight of her departure was suffocating, pressing down on him at every turn. He buried himself in work, hoping to drown out the memories of their life together. But no amount of late nights at the office could silence the stillness of his empty home. Every evening, the quiet crept in, whispering reminders of what he had lost. Though he tried not to, he often thought of Amal, wondering if she was happy with Victor or if she regretted her decision. Yet, even in his darkest hours, Martin knew he had done the right thing. He could never live with someone who had shattered his trust so completely, no matter how much he had loved her. Time, as it always does, moved forward. The months passed, and slowly, Martin began to heal. Though the scars of betrayal remained, they no longer defined him. His work became a source of solace, and the unwavering support of friends helped him navigate through the pain. Meanwhile, Amal's new life with Victor proved far from what she had imagined. The thrill and passion that once drew her to him faded, replaced by control and indifference. Victor dominated every aspect of their relationship, showing little interest in the things that once brought her joy. She felt trapped in a cold, transactional existence, far removed from the life she had left behind. As the emptiness grew, Amal found herself longing for the stability and love she had taken for granted. She missed the quiet peace she'd shared with Martin, the sense of belonging that came from being with someone who truly cared for her. Most of all, she missed a man who had loved her unconditionally, even when she had pushed him away. One night, overwhelmed by regret, Amal picked up her phone and typed a message. "I made a mistake. I miss us. I miss you." Her heart pounded as she hit send, her breath catching as she waited for his response. When it finally came, the words were few but carried the weight of finality. "You made your choice. Goodbye." Tears streamed down Amal's face as she stared at the message. The reality of her actions crashed over her. She had gambled everything and lost. There was no way back. For Martin, the end of his marriage had been the most painful experience of his life, but it also became a turning point. It taught him profound lessons about love, loyalty, and the strength that comes from moving forward. Though the future remained uncertain, Martin felt ready to face it, knowing he had found resilience within himself.